You ever hear something so absolutely unhinged that you have to ask the person to repeat it just to make sure you heard correctly? Well, buckle up, because what my fiancé asked me to do at our wedding made me cancel the entire thing, and trust me, you're going to want to stick around for this one. So I'm a 30-year-old guy, and 3 weeks ago I canceled my wedding that was supposed to happen in 2 months, and I canceled it because my fiancée Sarah decided without telling me that she was going to make her ex-boyfriend one of my groomsmen, and when I say ex-boyfriend, I don't mean some guy she dated for a month in high school. I'm talking about her serious ex-boyfriend of 4 years who she dated right before me, and who she's remained best friends with throughout our entire relationship. Let me back up and give you the full context, because this situation is absolutely wild. Sarah and I have been together for 3 years and engaged for 8 months. And from the very beginning of our relationship, she's been super close with her ex Marcus. Like, they text constantly and hang out one-on-one. And she's always talking about how important his friendship is to her and how they just work better as friends than they did as a couple. I'll be honest, it made me uncomfortable from day one, but Sarah always said I was being insecure and that not everyone has to hate their exes, and she'd get really defensive whenever I brought it up, saying that Marcus was one of her best friends, and she wasn't going to cut him out of her life just because we were dating. I tried to be the cool, understanding boyfriend, I really did, because I didn't want to be that jealous, controlling guy who tells his girlfriend who she can and can't be friends with. So I swallowed my discomfort and tried to accept that Marcus was just going to be part of our lives. But it was always weird, like they had all these inside jokes and they'd reminisce about their relationship all the time, and he'd show up at her apartment unannounced, and she'd cancel plans with me if Marcus needed her for something. And a few times I walked in on them hugging or sitting really close on the couch, and they'd jump apart like they'd been caught doing something wrong. My friends all told me I was crazy for putting up with it and that there was definitely still something going on between them, but Sarah swore up and down that they were just friends and that I needed to trust her. And I wanted to trust her so badly that I convinced myself everyone else was wrong. When we got engaged, Sarah wanted Marcus at the wedding, obviously, and I figured he'd be on her side as one of her guests, or maybe she'd make him a bridesman or whatever. And I was fine with that, even though it wasn't ideal. But then 2 weeks ago, Sarah casually mentioned that she'd asked Marcus to be one of my groomsmen, and he'd said yes. I thought I'd misheard her at first, so I asked her to repeat it, and she said it again like it was the most normal thing in the world, that Marcus was going to be a groomsman on my side, standing up there with my actual friends during our wedding ceremony. I asked her what the hell she was thinking and why she would do that without even discussing it with me first, and she said she thought it would be a nice gesture to show that we were all mature adults who could be friends, and plus, Marcus really wanted to be part of the wedding party, and she didn't have room for him on her side because she already had 6 bridesmaids. I told her absolutely not. There was no way her ex-boyfriend was going to be standing on my side at my own wedding, and she got really upset and said I was being ridiculous and controlling and that Marcus was important to both of us, so it made sense for him to be a groomsman. I said Marcus was important to her, not to me, and I'd literally never considered him a friend. I just tolerated him because she insisted on keeping him in her life, and she said that was really hurtful, and she couldn't believe I'd been fake with Marcus this whole time. We had this massive argument where she kept saying I was being insecure and jealous and that modern couples don't have these weird possessive attitudes about exes, and I kept saying this wasn't about being possessive. It was about basic boundaries and respect, and having her ex-boyfriend as one of my groomsmen crossed about 1,000,000 lines. She said she'd already told Marcus he could do it, and she wasn't going to take it back because that would be humiliating for him, and I said I didn't care about humiliating Marcus. I cared about the fact that my fiancé thought it was appropriate to make major decisions about our wedding without consulting me. She started crying and said she thought I'd be happy that she was trying to integrate all the important people in her life, and that she'd always imagined Marcus being a big part of our wedding because he was one of her closest friends, and she couldn't believe I was making her choose between her fiancé and her best friend. I told her I wasn't making her choose anything. She could invite Marcus as a guest. She could sit him at the head table. She could dance with him, whatever. But he was not going to be standing up at the altar with my actual friends pretending to be my friend when we both knew he wasn't. Sarah said I was ruining everything and being completely unreasonable, and then she called her mom, who of course took her side and called me to say I was being immature, and that Sarah was just trying to create a blended friend group, and I should be grateful that she wanted to include Marcus instead of hiding him. I talked to my own parents and my groomsmen about the situation, and literally every single person said the same thing, that Sarah was out of her mind if she thought this was appropriate, and my best friend Jake said point blank that if Marcus was going to be a groomsman, then Jake was out because he wasn't standing next to Sarah's ex-boyfriend at my wedding. That's when I realized how completely insane this situation was, that I was potentially going to lose my actual best friend from my wedding party because my fiancée insisted on including her ex-boyfriend, and I told Sarah that we needed to have a serious come-to-Jesus conversation about this whole thing. I sat her down and said, look, this isn't just about Marcus being a groomsman. This is about a pattern of behavior where you prioritize your relationship with your ex over your relationship with me. And I need you to really think about why you're fighting so hard for this and why you can't see how inappropriate it is. She got really defensive and said she wasn't prioritizing Marcus over me. She just valued his friendship and didn't understand why I couldn't accept that. And I said because he's your ex-boyfriend, Sarah, and most people establish boundaries with their exes when they get into new, serious relationships, but you've done the opposite and actually gotten closer to him since we've been together. I brought up specific examples, like the time she ditched my birthday dinner to go comfort Marcus when he got dumped by some girl he'd been seeing, or the time she told Marcus about our engagement before she told her own sister, or the fact that she has him as her emergency contact instead of me. She said those were all explainable, and I was twisting everything to make it seem worse than it was, and I said, okay. Then explain to me why you think your ex-boyfriend needs to be one of my groomsmen, use logic and help me understand, and she couldn't give me a real answer beyond, because he's important to me. I told her that wasn't good enough, that important to her should mean he's a guest at our wedding, not that he's standing up there with my college roommate and my brother pretending to be part of my inner circle, and she said if I really loved her, I'd do this one thing to make her happy. That line really got to me because it felt manipulative as hell. Like she was saying if I didn't let her ex-boyfriend be in our wedding party, then I didn't really love her, and I told her that was emotional blackmail and it wasn't fair to frame it that way. She started crying harder and said she felt like I was trying to control who she could be friends with, and I said no. I was trying to establish normal, reasonable boundaries in our relationship, and if she couldn't see the difference, then maybe we had bigger problems than I thought. The argument ended with both of us really upset and nothing resolved. And the next day, Sarah went ahead and texted Marcus that he should get fitted for a tux because he was officially a groomsman, which she did deliberately without telling me. And I only found out because Marcus texted me saying he was honored to stand up with me on my big day, and he hoped this meant we could finally become real friends. I absolutely lost it when I saw that text because Sarah had gone behind my back after our huge fight and done the exact thing I'd told her was a deal breaker, and when I confronted her about it, she said she was tired of arguing and she'd made her decision and I needed to respect it. I told her that by making that decision unilaterally, she'd shown me that she didn't respect me or our relationship, and she couldn't just steamroll over my feelings about our own wedding, and she said I was being dramatic, and once the wedding was over, I'd realize it wasn't a big deal. That's when I made my decision. I told her that if Marcus was going to be a groomsman, then there wasn't going to be a wedding, because I wasn't going to marry someone who had so little regard for my feelings and boundaries, and I meant it. She didn't believe me at first, and said I was bluffing to try to manipulate her into uninviting Marcus, but I told her I was completely serious, and I started making calls to cancel vendors. I called the venue first, and fortunately, we were still outside the final payment window, so we only lost our deposit. Then I called the caterer and the photographer and the DJ and started the process of canceling everything, and Sarah was screaming at me saying I was insane and ruining our lives over nothing. I told her this wasn't about nothing. This was about the fact that she'd rather have her ex-boyfriend in our wedding than respect my very reasonable boundary, and that told me everything I needed to know about where her priorities were. My parents were supportive when I told them what happened. My dad said he'd been worried about the Sarah and Marcus thing from the beginning, and he was glad I was standing up for myself. And my mom said she loved Sarah, but that this was beyond inappropriate, and if Sarah couldn't see that, then maybe she wasn't ready to be married. Sarah's family was a different story. Her mom called me screaming about how I was throwing away a wonderful woman over jealousy and insecurity. And her dad said I was acting like a child and that in marriage you have to compromise. And I said, yes, compromise is normal. But compromising by letting your wife's ex-boyfriend be in your wedding party isn't compromise. It's being a doormat. I told all our friends what happened, and the reactions were pretty split. Sarah's friends obviously took her side and said I was being controlling and that she should be able to have whoever she wants at her wedding. But my friends and most of the mutual friends we had agreed that what Sarah did was completely out of line. The story got back to Marcus somehow, and he actually called me, which was awkward as hell. And he said he didn't mean to cause problems, and maybe he should back out of being a groomsman to keep the peace. And I told him the issue wasn't him backing out. The issue was that Sarah thought it was appropriate in the first place. I asked Marcus point blank if there was still something going on between him and Sarah, because from the outside it really looked like there was. And he swore there wasn't and that they really were just friends, but then he said something that made my blood run cold. He said, "You know, Sarah and I have a special connection that's hard to explain. We just get each other in a way that's rare, but that doesn't mean it's romantic." That confirmed everything I'd been feeling, that Sarah had this deep emotional connection with her ex that she'd never fully let go of, and whether or not they were physically cheating didn't really matter, because emotionally she was still deeply entangled with him. I told Marcus thanks for being honest, and then I said I thought it was best if he and Sarah figured out what they actually wanted, because clearly there was unfinished business there, and he got quiet and said maybe I was right. After I got off the phone with Marcus, I had this moment of clarity where I realized I'd been ignoring red flags for 3 years, and Sarah's insistence on keeping Marcus so involved in her life wasn't about being mature or progressive. It was about the fact that she wasn't fully over him and maybe never would be. I called Sarah and told her I wanted to talk in person, and when she came over, I laid out everything I'd been thinking. That I believed she still had feelings for Marcus whether she admitted it or not, and her inability to establish boundaries with him showed that she wasn't ready to fully commit to a marriage with me. She denied it at first and said I was being paranoid, but then I asked her directly, if you had to choose between a life with me where Marcus wasn't part of it or a life with Marcus where I wasn't part of it, what would you choose? And she couldn't answer immediately. The fact that she had to think about it told me everything, and I said that's exactly the problem, Sarah. Your husband should be the automatic answer, not something you have to debate internally. And she started crying and said it wasn't fair to make her choose because she loved me, but Marcus was family to her. I told her that Marcus shouldn't be family to her, I should be family to her, and the fact that she was putting her ex on the same level as her fiancé was the whole issue, and she said I was being black and white about something that was more complicated than that. I told her that actually it wasn't complicated at all, that normal people establish boundaries with their exes when they get serious with someone new, and the fact that she'd fought so hard to keep Marcus deeply embedded in our lives meant she wasn't ready to let go of whatever they had. We talked for hours, and eventually Sarah admitted that maybe she'd been holding on to Marcus because he represented this part of her life where everything was easier and less complicated, and that scared her because it meant I might be right about her not being fully over him. I appreciated the honesty, but it didn't change anything, and I told her that I couldn't marry her knowing that there was this other person who held such a significant place in her heart, and that maybe we both needed time to figure out what we actually wanted. The wedding is officially canceled, we've told everyone, and I've moved out of our apartment into my own place, and Sarah has been texting me constantly saying she realizes now that she was wrong, and she's willing to set boundaries with Marcus if I'll reconsider, but honestly, I think it's too little too late. The fact that it took canceling our wedding for her to even consider that maybe her relationship with her ex was inappropriate tells me that she didn't really get it, and I don't want to spend my marriage wondering if my wife wishes she'd married someone else. So what do you think? Did I overreact by canceling the wedding, or was I right to walk away from someone who couldn't establish basic boundaries with her ex? Drop your thoughts in the comments because I'm still processing all of this, and I genuinely want to know what you all think. And if this story made you want to hear more crazy relationship drama, then hit that subscribe button and smash the notification bell. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.